Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I'm Tiff, and it has been a while. In fact, it's been 4 months since my last video, but we're starting with a new video format of car reviews. First up is the new 2024 CHR, and we're going to be answering 2 questions today. 1, is it better than the old CHR? And 2, is it worth a price tag in the mid-40s, mid-40,000 £? You'll find out. Hope you enjoy. So in the lovely setting of the Black Mountain Road, which is fantastic and I'd highly recommend if you're a petrol head, the first thing we're going to do is a quick exterior and interior walk around. Initially, my view, obviously this is a family member's car, hence the L on the plate. My view is that this looks a lot better than the previous CHR, and it's got Toyota's new design language in it. It's got a much more aggressive front end, and I've no idea how this sharp front edge managed to pass all of the EU regs when the Tesla Cyber Fridge can't, but there you go. This being the GR Sport then, it comes in this colour called Precious Silver, which I really like the look of actually. It looks really clean, and also it sort of accentuates all of the lines that you can see, with obviously the contrasting high gloss black on the rear. An interesting quirk of this car that we found is how sharp the tail lights are when you open the boot. So if you have a small child whose head height is, you know, around here on you, this is absolutely lethal. We didn't really realise that until we opened it up. But on the practicality side then, you do have a huge boot. I think it's bigger than the previous one, or it certainly is to my memory. And you do have a power assisted tailgate. We'll kick off the interior with the rear seats, because that gives you the best view of the panoramic roof. Now, it's not electrochromatic, so it is a fixed shaded pan roof. However, it is absolutely lovely, and it does make the cabin feel a lot airier. Space in the rear is quite good. I've got lots of leg room, and the seat is in the driving position of somebody who's about 5'10" with fairly long legs. And then you've got USB-C in the rear for the rear passengers. 2 things of note on the interior then are this enormous C-pillar, which sort of obscures your rear visibility when driving, but the rear view mirror does fit the whole rear windscreen in it, so you can really see out the back fairly well. And then the owner points out to me that you've got quite a shallow footwell because the battery is under the seats and under the floor. So actually, although you've got a lot of legroom in front, there's not actually that big a footwell. In fact, you can even see the battery pack just underneath the rear passenger footwell. Lastly then, and probably most importantly, onto the driver zone. This is the only Toyota, I'm told, that has the pop-out handles at the moment. It's a nice feature, and obviously they fold in to reduce wind noise and wind resistance when it's rolling. So the GR Sport then gets these quite nice, I mean, I almost want to call them bucket seats. They're quite deep, finished in Alcantara and synthetic leather, I believe. All vegan is what I'm told. And they've got this lovely red contrast stitch going around, and of course the GR Sport steering wheel. There are a few luxuries like wireless phone charging as well, dual zone climate control, a huge nav screen which syncs up to Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, and then obviously you've got your second screen in front of you with what you would normally have on the instrument cluster. The only things you really need to know as a motorist then are to turn it on, hit the button, which is now to the left of the steering wheel. It was to the right in the old CHR, and to get to sport mode, your toggle is in the centre there. Other than that, off you go. One other thing worth noting then is that you can toggle your rear view mirror to the digital reversing camera at any point. You can have that while you're driving. That is an optional extra. And then one last thing of note then is that the charging port on this is at the rear right. I know a lot are on the front wings now, and it doesn't support fast charging yet, but it is just a standard connector. So onto the driving and handling section of this video review then. Now, this is not the sort of car I normally drive, so initially it just feels quite heavy and quite a high centre of gravity to me. But for an SUV, it does handle its mass very well. There is a little bit of lightness just off centre with the steering, but once you get into the meat of the lock in a corner, it does weighten up a little bit, and you do get a little bit of feedback, which is handy for avoiding sheep. To summarise the handling then, it's exceptionally light and easy, and there is a decent amount of feedback. I don't notice any real change between normal and sport modes, other than perhaps it weightens up a little bit more in the sport mode. So if we view a score of 5 out of 10 as average, any less than something's wrong, and any more and something's obviously shined for me a bit, then the CHR is absolutely adequate and gets a 5 out of 10 from me. So performance then on this plug-in hybrid variant of the new CHR is 220 brake horsepower, and that's from essentially the same 4-cylinder 2-litre engine that you found in the old CHR, only this one is not turbocharged. It is coupled to a battery kicking out about 120 of the engine's brake horsepower, and that's enough for 0 to 62 in about 7.5 seconds. It tops out at 111 miles an hour. My driving impression from it though is that from a standstill, particularly obviously because it's battery powered, there's just oodles of torque to get you off the line immediately, and then once you're up to speed, if you're just looking for a car that performs fairly well, I can't see why you'd need much more power than this in normal traffic. 220 horsepower puts it on par with sort of most mid-range hot hatches now. I know hot hatches are a dying breed in the UK, but because of the instant torque, it feels like that's plenty on a British B road. I scored the CHR at 5 out of 10 for performance. The torque delivery is really well measured, and it's probably all the power someone really needs, at least on British roads. So moving on then to a section inspired by Doug DeMuro's daily part of his car reviews. He includes all sorts of factors and gives scores out of 10 on, I think, economy and space, that sort of thing. My daily score is just going to be all in one. It's going to be based on how capacious the car is, its efficiency, and if it's essentially good to run every day, cheap to run, cheap to insure, etc. Now, obviously, if you're looking at a review for this car, you're going to be bothered about fuel economy, and the claimed MPG for this car is 313 MPG, which it was explained to me that's to do with people in plug-in hybrid vehicles tend to do short electric-only journeys, and then that's like the real-world figure. The owner of this car has told me that they get, when they're pushing it on a mixed cycle, about 55 miles to the gallon. That tallies with what other car reviewers have said, where they're getting around 56 to 60 miles to the gallon on a combined cycle. So this car has a fuel tank of a little under 10 gallons, it's about 9.5 gallons, and if you're getting sort of between 50-60 mpg, you can expect therefore to get a little under 500 miles on one tank. The range on pure electric is about 40 miles, but the owner of this car tells me that they can get up to about 50 miles if they're being fairly conservative, and also if you're using the high regeneration when you lift off. So the owner of this car has done a little over 12,000 miles in just over 4 months. They've been piling the miles on quite quickly, and they're uniquely qualified to compare it to the previous CHR, having done over 100,000 miles in that. And what I'm told is that the new CHR beats the CHR in every single way in terms of drivability, refinement, pace, cabin quality, general driving feel, and also in its practicality and ergonomics. The downside, according to the previous owner, and you may notice our GoPro's just run out of battery, so we've switched to a mobile phone. The downside, according to the previous owner, is that there are all sorts of beeps and whirs and things you can't switch off, and it's all obviously all of the new EU regulations, saying you've got to have lane assist, lane departure warning, it's got to have speed limit assist and sense if you're speeding and bong at you if you're over the speed limit. And I've got to say, in the brief amount of time I've driven this car, it is annoying, and the first thing you want to do is turn that off. 1,000 miles in a little over... what? I was impressed by how spacious the interior and boot are. It's cheap to run and insure, and if you spec one at less than 40k, tax is only £190. So the CHR gets a strong daily score of 7 out of 10 from me. On to the POV section of our video review then. Normally I would attach a GoPro to the back of the car to get the sound, but this car has a CVT, so there's no real sound of startup or going through the gears of any significance. To head back down essentially from just past the viewpoint and hairpin on the Black Mountain Road. Sheep. And away we go again. So, making sure we're in sport mode. It is a truly lovely road, this. Also, you get a sense from the POV of just how refined this car is. There's no real noise from the tyres. They've managed to insulate that quite well. So with just a little bit of road noise, the biggest noise in fact is the sound of wind rushing over the wing mirrors, which you do notice because everything else is so quiet. car is loaded with tech, which I'm not normally the sort of person who would be using. I'm more of a go and just drag it on a mountain road kind of person. But if you are interested, you can see sort of where the battery regeneration is going, where the power's coming from. Unfortunately, there's no warning on the screen there to show you how near the nearest sheep that you're about to obliterate is. So my conclusion then, from the passenger seat, as you'll see now, is that 1, yes, it's better than the old CHR in every measurable way, and 2, is it worth a price tag in the mid-40s? Now, that's something you'll obviously have to decide for yourself. I would say it's a brilliant car if you're just looking for a car and you're not somebody who's too bothered in motoring. If you're looking for something that's going to set your hair on fire, maybe look somewhere elsewhere. But that price tag obviously comes a lot more attractive if you're buying it as a company car or that sort of thing where you get a bit of a tax benefit out of it. Bottom line then, enjoyable. Final of my 4 categories is what I'm going to call a Tiff Score, for want of a better phrase, like the X Factor, not that X Factor, but the X Factor that you can't put your finger on. I'd probably give this car, I don't want to be mean, sat in the passenger seat, but bearing in mind the bottom of it is probably a Lada and the top of it is a LaFerrari, this probably sits somewhere around a 4 or 5 in my desirability, but then again my requirements for a car are that it is stupid and makes loud noise and looks a bit more like a coupe.
In a quarter of a mile, left turn.
And isn't full of electronic things. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Ciao. The CHR is the first car on our currently sparse scoreboard, and it sets a decent benchmark of 52.5%. An overall score of 20 out of 40, 50%, is the minimum that any vehicle should achieve if it's worth considering by this metric. But remember, this is all based on my own opinion of how it feels and drives in the real world, and of course the Tiff Score is my own completely biased view of how much I desire the car.